last of the troops have left Gaza, even though some say that the job there was not completed. There's no question that Israel was able to hurt Hamas and the terror organization, but did they actually do enough before caving into the pressure from the UN for a ceasefire? Our president has now spoken out and said that Israel should open the Gaza border. Wow. Brigitte Gabriel is the author of the book They Must Be Stopped and president of actforamerica.org. She's been following this story for us and joins us now with her report on the savage nation.
Thanks, Michael. Israel finished its offensive in Gaza, and the world is trying to deal with the aftermath. Just like after every time Israel finally reacts to Palestinian aggression, we are again talking about solutions, rebuilding, and moving towards that elusive, quote, lasting peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The problem is this: the Palestinians today are not one unified group with one representative who can speak on their behalf as it was under Yasser Arafat. Ever since Hamas came to power in 2005, the whole dynamic of the negotiation process, the Palestinian people, and what their wishes are have changed. When the world negotiated the Oslo Accord in 2003 and later the talks about the roadmap to peace with Abbas, the Palestinian Authority actually represented the Palestinian people. Today, Hamas is a separate Palestinian government operating in Gaza, with a charter specifically demanding the destruction of Israel, while Fatah represents the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and actually negotiates with Israel. And they are die-hard enemies, while the more moderate Fatah came to the realization that you have to tone down violence in order to advance your cause cleverly with Israel through negotiation. Hamas decided to take the violence route and rallied the Palestinians in Gaza, who believed in the same vision to split from the Palestinian Authority. As far as the Palestinians in Gaza are concerned, a holy jihad against Israel is the only way to wipe the state of Israel off the map. They were not concerned with living side by side with peace. They were committed to fighting Israel till death. And Hamas is feeling their oats in pushing the jihad agenda against Israel. They have a lot of non-Muslim sympathizers across the world who have been caught up in the anti-Israel fervor in the past 10 years. It has very strong Muslim allies in the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the mother bear, Iran, providing nurturing, training, and armament to Hamas. Sunday, one of Hamas's representatives, Osama Hamdan, said the Palestinian Authority, quote, must end its peace talks and security coordinations with Israel if it ever expects to reconcile with Hamas. He also vowed that Hamas will continue to bring arms to Gaza. The huge mistake Israel made is stopping the operation and agreeing to a ceasefire while it had Hamas almost in its palm. After weeks of bombardment, Hamas was weak, its leaders hiding in tunnels, unable to receive supplies like they used to before the operation, and Israel had a chance to completely take over the crossing with Egypt and force Hamas to surrender. Only then could Israel have really achieved success through its operation and forced the Palestinians to come to the negotiation table, humiliated, and forced to comply with international pressure to stop launching rockets on Israel. Michael, Hamas only understands force and absolute victory. Because Israel stopped short of defeating Hamas and ensuring its decapitation, it literally handed the public relation victory over to Hamas, just like it did in Lebanon after its war with Hezbollah. Hamas is still today dedicated to Israel's destruction. Hamas has international contacts and is a part of a worldwide network of terrorists backed by a petrodollar-rich, oil-producing country, Iran, which is also on the verge of obtaining nuclear weapons. This Hamas victory against Israel now emboldens not only the variety of terrorist organizations in the Middle East and abroad, but also Iran. President Obama came out Friday urging Israel to open up the Gaza border with Egypt, allowing the Palestinians to bring in goods and commercial products. The fact that President Obama would even suggest that shows that he lacks the knowledge of the forces on the ground and the political dynamic of the different Islamic terrorist groups working together with Hamas. Even though Egypt is headed by President Mubarak, who came out forcefully, along with Saudi Arabia and Jordan, against Hamas, Egypt has no power over the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood organization, who is working actively with Hamas in a common bond of holy jihad against the Jews. Even if Israel agreed to open the border, trusting that Egypt would work to ensure that arms would not be smuggled to Hamas from Egypt, the government policies do not represent the wishes of the people on the ground, who are members of the Muslim Brotherhood, who dig tunnels out of their homes in Egypt and send weapons to Hamas. The problem, Michael, with opening the border with Egypt for the commercial goods to rebuild Gaza, such as cement, metal, and glass, to be transported is very risky. Hamas terrorists built rockets from pipes important for a sanitation plant. Hamas still controls Gaza, and Hamas would even acquire these materials either through capturing the trucks or by intimidating the builders and resell the materials in order to build its financial war chest to buy weapons. Israeli intelligence sources also recently found in Iranian-leased ships anchored 10 miles to sea in Egyptian waters with weapons packed in waterproof containers designed to travel underwater. During the night, Iranian frogmen transport the containers and tie them to Palestinian fishing boats located closer to shore. The Palestinian boats return to Gaza, towing the containers underwater to avoid detection. The Obama administration must put in place a mechanism to ensure the control of the border before asking Israel or Egypt to open it. One of the discussed proposals by Israel is a multinational force organization, just like the one in Sinai, which was created after the 1979 Israeli-Egypt peace treaty. This type of international force headed by the United States and has the power to take military action if it needs to in order to halt weapons smuggling. If the international community does not follow through on a plan to stop the smuggling, and if Egypt fails to act, this could lead Israel to occupy the southern edge of Gaza where the tunnels are located. But one of the most important lessons, Michael, about fighting a war with Islamic radicals who believe they are on a holy mission have still not been learned. And here's what I mean. All across the Arabic world, and especially in Gaza and Lebanon, Muslims are celebrating a, quote, divine victory. This term has been repeated constantly after the Hezbollah war in 2006 and now after the Hamas war in Gaza. These radicals are more empowered than ever because of this divine victory. So what are they talking about? They are talking about the 7th century Battle of Badr, in which the Prophet Muhammad's 313 fighters defeated an army 3 times its size. At the Al-Rahma Mosque in the southern Gaza tip of Khan el-Yunis, Sheikh Ahmed Namr compared the war with Israel to the Battle of Badr. Quote, just because we lost hundreds of martyrs and more than 5,000 wounded doesn't mean we are not victorious, he said. The Israelis could hardly even get inside the cities of Gaza because Allah is with the Muslims, not the Jews, end quote. Michael, I have read at least 50 articles today from across the Israeli and American intelligence and press. Not one of them even mentioned this. Israel's Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center called it, quote, the myth of divine victory, and continued justifying in Western words how Israel won the war by the destruction inflicted on the infrastructure of Gaza. We are not listening to our enemy, even though they are screaming their words from the rooftops and what is driving them. I discuss this in detail in my book, They Must Be Stopped. And I give 3 battles that defined Islamic war thinking and why. The Battle of Badr is one of them. When Yasser Arafat gave interviews in Arabic to the Arabic press, he would constantly quote the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. Every time he was asked, how could you sign a peace treaty with Israel? He would say to them, remember the Prophet and the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. Michael, the Arabs understood exactly what he was talking about. We in the West and the Israelis had no clue. It went right over our heads. The Arabs knew the significance. He was describing how the Prophet signed a peace treaty with his enemy, the Meccans, and used the time to rebuild his army until he was strong enough to attack and defeat them. 2 years later, Muhammad broke the treaty and attacked them and took over Mecca when they were least expecting it. Michael, here is the point we in the West miss. Deception in war is one of the main commandments and tactics of Islam. No matter what Hamas agrees to, it is only to placate gullible Western politicians who do not understand nor listen to what the Islamists are really saying to their street. They have a plan to eradicate the Jews from the Middle East. Talking is useless. Unless Obama can change their goals, his talking is just going to make him a pawn in their hands till they can destroy Israel. This is why, Michael, it is up to people like you and me to sound the alarm, to throw political correctness in the garbage where it belongs and start calling a spade a spade. We have no time to waste. I'm Brigitte Gabriel. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks for the report, Brigitte. I'll be right back.
Savage.